Thanks for having me. This is so nice. I have so much to say. But to use one of Robert's favorite words, how the fuck am I going to follow up any of this? That was amazing between Jasmine and Robert and everything. And fun fact, I heard Robert's presentation last week, but I was still like furiously scribbling down notes on this pad of paper that I have beside me because I learned something every time. If you don't know who Dieter Rams is, he is stellar. And although he's in the world of product design, he's a big inspiration to me. There's a documentary available on him. I think it's on Amazon Prime, number of streaming services, however you cool kids get movies and things nowadays. I would say go check it out. And there are so many things, again, that Robert touched on and the previous people have touched on here. And I'm actually going to take one of the opposite directions from Robert's presentation. That Farm Boy client study was incredible and I learned a lot from it. My presentation is solely focused on personal projects. You know, that thing that you do when you're not burnt out and you have some personal time, you know? So what I'd love to know before we start is there anything that you're working on right now that's just a passion project that's just for you or just for friends or just something personal? Leave it in the chat below. I'd love to hear about it. Or you can just say yes if it's too personal and you don't want to share it. So I'd love to know that. Second, I'll say the cardinal sin, which is I didn't go to design school. Oh, I know, everyone freak out. Throw things at me. I actually went to school for nutrition and I graduated from the University of Guelph. So a big part of this in terms of personal projects is how I leverage those to get to where I am today as a writer, designer, photographer, and poetry author. So Jasmine, we have to talk about that. So without further ado, I will share my screen and we can go into it. Perfect, okay. Awesome. So everything matters until it doesn't. Ryan, why would you start with such a problematic statement? Are you that problematic? Maybe, I don't know, you'll find out. But the truth is, this presentation is a massive focus on all the things aside from the client work that I've done that have brought me more work, brought me more experience and projects that I really wanted to work on. An important note here is that every single thing that you will see in this presentation, -1, is personal project, not a client thing at all. And because there's one client project, I would encourage you to actually guess which one it is, right? So just a brief introduction before we begin. I live in Waterloo, Ontario, the same place as one of the other guests who's in this presentation right now, Steph Butari, who's been involved with the Ottawa Design Club and done takeovers and all sorts of things. I'm a big fan of your work, just want to say it publicly. But I'm based in Waterloo, and my work is based in 3 critical disciplines: copywriting, concept, like Robert mentioned, graphic design, and photography. Playing around with motion design a little bit, After Effects, that sort of thing, but those are the 3 critical disciplines that I choose to focus on. I've had the pleasure of living in Vancouver, BC, doing brief stints in Toronto, now being based in Waterloo and having clients all over the world, which is fantastic. But the truth is, most of the work that I've ever gotten is from personal projects, things I didn't even mean to turn into anything, passion things, like the zine or like books that I've written. What I'd also love to know is how many of you want to know how to get more clients in your practice? You can leave it in the chat if you'd like, or throw a reaction of. Most of the time people get frustrated when they're trying to get clients. They're sending out resumes for jobs or for clients and cover letters and all these things. And I'm here to tell you, much like Marty Neumeier, you have to zag while everyone zigs. If everyone is sending out resumes, I'm sure there's something you can do, like a book or a zine, that will get someone's attention in some other way. But more on that later. As far as design goes, I was obsessed with music videos as a kid. I have an older sister. She would show me videos from Missy Elliott, 50 Cent, rappers, A Tribe Called Quest, et cetera, et cetera. I know I'm dating myself here by the music I'm stating, but I was obsessed with that world. And every time I would see music videos on screen, I would think, those colors look cool, but I don't know how to describe it. Those words look interesting, the way that the type is set, but I don't really have the words for it for now. The way these palettes move, or the way these shapes move, it's really interesting to me. Later, I would learn that it was an obsession with design and an obsession with art, but it took time to get those reference points. But TLDR, that love that I had as a kid is what drives me forward today in all these disciplines that I'm involved in. So based on the title of this presentation, everything that you think matters doesn't matter as much. We have timelines for projects, we have scope, we have bills to pay, we have rent, all these things. And I know it's a juxtaposition to say, but we'll dive into why. So every single thing here is a personal project. There were two really important things I did during this pandemic, which actually led to more client projects than I've ever had, to the point where I had to turn them away because I am a human being who needs sleep and I only have so many hours in the day. Early in the pandemic, I decided to do a challenge of 30 designs in Illustrator for 30 days, just to get better at the software, just to learn more about the envelope mesh tool or how to better use the pen tool. I'm still not that great at it, but that's why I use shapes a lot more. And a 30 days in Photoshop experiment, where 30 days after in Photoshop, I would create 30 designs to learn more about masking, to learn more about interesting, weird, nuanced techniques in Photoshop that I never got to use for client projects. If you're also a fellow logo designer, you know that with client projects, there's fairly standardized processing, right? You can draw inspiration from other different places, but as far as creating an end product, usually the logo ends up being fairly similar. You show 1 to 3 prototypes, the client settles on 1, maybe 2, or different variations and lockups. You make mockups, et cetera, et cetera. The cool thing about personal projects like these is it let me play with tools that I would never get a chance to when it came to client work. But the interesting thing is it all led to more client work that I had to turn down in many cases. So one of the projects that I was involved in, the FedEx products in the right upper left-hand corner, sorry, is a social distancing logo series that I just did for fun to show what if popular logos that we loved, FedEx, the Amazons of the world, the Nikes of the world, what if they had social distancing variations? And that was a fun series too. Growing up, I was obsessed with the Neptunes and Pharrell Williams. I think he is one of the coolest beings of all time, aside from Robert Smith, who's like a close second on that, and Izzy and Aragon. Obsessed with Pharrell. So in Photoshop and Illustrator, I decided to make 2 posters that just took advantage of basic things. A couple duplications in layers, some basic paper cutout textures, white space, masking, very simple concepts, not very complex typefaces either. The downtown Kitchener illustration in the bottom left, fun fact, was designed when I was completely inebriated on New Year's. We were in lockdown. It was tough, I know, for many of us. I had a drink and FaceTime with a few friends, or maybe a few drinks. And I decided to open up the artboard and do something completely different to what I normally do, illustration work. Now I know what you're thinking, why? Why do something that random? We'll find out later in the presentation. And the rest of the designs on here were just ways of exploring typography. They were just ways of exploring tools and techniques and things that I've never gotten a chance to before with client work. So from a design perspective, all this is personal. Same thing goes with photography. These were projects tasked by fellow artists in the city, Sam Nabi, Eloquent, or musicians, dancers like Tommy, and Trisha Abe, who is a very popular artist here in the Kitchener-Waterloo area. Again, all personal, but the importance here is being able to play and show range in work. And again, does this matter? Maybe not as much as you think. We'll find out why. Back to what Robert mentioned on concepts and copywriting and direction. This entire design is probably one of my favorites that I've done personally, and it's one of the most simple. There's no flourishes, and it all stemmed from my eyes being super strained from this pandemic of looking at screens all the time. So I was at the optometrist office and I was looking just mindlessly at some of the charts that were on the wall. And I let my mind wander for a second and I thought, what are some alternates that you could create from this? You know, simple designs that take some simple copy that go down the list and get smaller and smaller in size. A week before, I had been involved with a volunteer organization, Women in Crisis, and had a number of chats with the director there and gone across a number of different designs that they could use for upcoming campaigns. And as soon as I went to the optometrist, this idea came to mind. After all the chats that we had with that director, after all the time going over presentations, this was one of the ideas that they went with as far as social media, because it was the strongest concept that they had. And it all stemmed from super personal stuff. Now, if you've had the pleasure of picking up this little guy right here, or being involved in it, I know there's a few people here that have contributed some fantastic work for it, you might have seen this design. And this stemmed from me laying on a couch that's right behind me, staring at a clock, waiting for the day to be over. Because I don't know about you, I've had some tough days during this pandemic. I have had days where I felt like there was no inspiration coming to me. I felt like I wouldn't be able to finish a client project on time. Simple tasks felt like they took everything out of me. Now, if you felt that way, if you have any experiences like that, feel free to drop it in the chat below. But again, to Robert's point before, there's nothing insanely complex about this design. It's fairly simple. There's some drop shadows applied, basic shapes. But the idea is that during quarantine and during this pandemic, time feels fucking broken. Some days it's good, some days it's tricky. And this was actually a good connection point for the Ottawa Design Club to be featured in the zine. But through that, I was able to come across a number of different artists and people that are attending this talk today and who also do incredible work around the world. But that said, none of that stuff matters as much as I might think. Sure, it's great to sharpen the design knife and the copywriting knife and the photography knife, but there's one thing that is way more important than anything that I've just showed you. Now, if you like, you can guess what it is in the chat. Anyone? No one? Okay. Are you ready? It's this little guy. Oh, it's me as a kid. Look at him. So impressionable, so happy. He just loved watching anime and playing in grass and hanging out with his mom. I mean, he still likes hanging out with his mom, FYI. But this is more important than pretty much anything else I've shown you. Now, I'm not just someone who likes showing off baby photos of himself. There's a reason for this, I promise. It's that child like me loved to play. He wasn't thinking about deadlines. He wasn't thinking about scope creep. He wasn't really thinking about rent. I mean, he didn't pay rent at that time. He would have had no way to do it. He was a child. He was thinking about play. He was thinking about experimentation. He was thinking about pushing all the edges and boundaries in the places that he went and the things that he did. He did handstands for no reason. He jumped on coffee tables. He loved play. Now, as an adult, we get so busy with client projects and with work, and especially during this pandemic, everyone slacks you or sends you a message on Teams or wherever at every hour of the day. It's fucking terrible, but it happens because the world we live in is so focused on productivity and so focused on projects and it's so focused on the next thing that we forget to be the child that just plays in grass and likes to hang out with his mom and watch cartoons. There's probably Pokemon around that time. My anime taste has gotten a little bit better since then, but that's a subject for another time. But play was essential as a child. In fact, play was the only thing that I really knew. And later on, as life, carried on, client projects came in, budgets came in, work came in, goals came in. I'm not saying not to do any of that. Those things are really important. But whatever that version is for you, whatever that play version is for you, it's important. And it can lead to client work in a lot of different cases because it can show the range of skills that you have. That's the most important thing here, and that's the punchline. The older I get, the more I understand that all the things that you think matter, the piece of paper that you've gotten in your degree, or the last project that you did, or being featured in X, Y, or Z magazine or publication, they matter to an extent, but maybe not as much as you think. Maybe the little things matter, like your favorite anime that you get to talk to Alexia about, or meeting Izzy over coffee right before the pandemic hit and just nerding out about design. All the things that are a part of you outside of your craft, whether personal projects or not, are incredibly important. And those act as connection points to the people around you. Whether it's the Ottawa Design Club magazine, whether it's books that you've written, they're just case studies to show what you can do and connect you to other people. And that is the punchline. Speaking about books, I know Jasmine mentioned poetry before. I've had the utmost pleasure of writing 3 poetry books. Now, I don't think I've said this publicly, so this will be the first place, I, of course, loved writing these books, but there was a hidden agenda when I did write them. In my opinion, business cards are dead. Not to offend anyone here if they do have business cards, please don't hate me. But I think the idea of a business card is dead. I think people want to contact you, but people want to see proof of work, however that comes across. These books for me, with all the poems contained, are just proof of design concept, proof of writing, and proof of creative direction. With the last project, Colors, which I'm mega proud of, for me, I was able to do short film work around it. I was able to do a whole rollout, a whole launch that no client would have ever given me the rein to do, which for me is important from a personal standpoint because it allows me to nurture skills in creative direction, but also it's the ultimate business card. Because with these books, maybe much like the Ottawa Design Club magazines, I was able to leave them around different parts of the city, even send some to Ottawa, Toronto, around the world. And people were able to see pieces of work of mine that truly were just for display and just to provoke thought. But it's about proof of concept. These books, for me, were 3 ways of showing my contact information, but also what I could do. And if I could do that from a personal standpoint, imagine what I could do for a client. Speaking of which, the first project I ever wrote, Better in Tune with the Infinite, pictured here, actually led to one of the coolest projects of my life. Designing these posters for an organization, a nonprofit in the Netherlands called OMEC. OMEC recently did the first African Diaspora Summit in the world, a global summit that brought together people from African diaspora, from the Netherlands, from Africa itself, from Europe, from all over the world to chat about their interests and their careers and how they got to where they needed to be. These were people from Nike, Adidas, Adobe, major companies in the world. But the reason I was able to design these posters is because a woman in Amsterdam came across one of these books in a cafe. And she contacted me and she said, I really love the way that you think. And she looked at the rest of my work on Instagram and public portfolio, but it wasn't about that. She said, I love the way that you think. The most flattering thing with a client or any project is when someone trusts you with your vision and someone trusts the work that you do and hire you for your thinking and hire you for your concept and how you can put things together. Now, I love Illustrator and I love Photoshop as much as the next person here, but I don't think anybody truly wants to be just a pixel pusher. We have ideas and we have things that we want to execute. And the truth is, if no one's going to give you that thing, you can make that thing, whether it's this or the zine, which is another reason that I'm so incredibly proud. I might start crying at this point, of Izzy and Ehyan and everyone in the team for making these things and available to everybody, which is great. I wanted to close off here this rapid fire train of thought with a phrase. How many of you have seen this phrase in your life? Jack of all trades, master of none. Few of you? Everyone? Okay. What most people don't know, and which actually blew my mind recently, is that there's more to this statement. It's actually just a piece of rhetoric. The full statement goes like this. Instead of Jack of all trades, master of none, it is Jack of all trades, master of none. Sometimes Jack is better than a master of one, which to me is the perfect way of saying, get involved in personal projects, make things out of passion. Don't just focus on the clients. Don't just focus on the budget. Don't just focus on the nuances. There's a lot more outside of it. And all the things that you're interested in, all the things that you volunteered in, all the things that you've taught or learned or do, they can come into play because building connectedness with other people and building concept around things is super key. But there's so many different ways of showing that. And that's it. Thank you guys. Oh, what a pleasure.